Welcome everyone to our Yogi of the Month interview. And my name's Jo Mitchell and I am a teacher at Yoga on Tea. And I'm very excited to introduce to you this month's interviewee, which is Julie Anderson, the boss, senior teacher at Yoga on Tea. And I'm very interested to hear her answers to our Yogi of the Month questions. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you, kind of, because this was a very unexpected turn of events when Marika and Jo said we were discussing who should it be next, and the tables turned.
Well, I'm interested. This is it. So I'm going to get straight into it and actually ask you, Julie, when did you start yoga?
I started yoga in 1979 at the age of 15. And there was a local class. I grew up in Blerno. The local class was in Curry, the next village, and my mum clearly wanted to go, but she didn't want to go herself. So she took her two daughters along, and that was the beginning.
Wow. And was that, what do you remember about that first class?
Now, that's an interesting question because I realized that question was going to come, having been part of the setting of the questions. And I thought, really? I cannot remember, but I remember the feeling of thinking, oh, this is interesting and I can do it. And I feel good for doing it. And I want to go again and again and again.
Yeah, got you. And was that an Iyengar Yoga class that you went to first off? Or just
No, I didn't meet Iyengar Yoga till 4 years later. So by that time I was 19. So very much the teenager out and about in town, and I would pass Brunsfield in Edinburgh, and there would be this wooden hand-painted sign outside the front of the Iyengar studio. And it was this man, I think he was a Natarajasan even then. And oh, that looks really authentic. That's traditional yoga. Oh, maybe one day I'll go. And it took me a while to summon up the courage because it looked like really proper and serious. And I summoned up the courage and I never looked back. That was the yoga for me.
Oh, wow. And do you remember then anything about the first Iyengar Yoga class that you were in? So it was at the centre, the Edinburgh Iyengar Yoga Centre.
Yes, that's right. So I had a scientific background. Even then I started a physiotherapy course and I went on to do biological sciences. So I had at that point a basic education in human anatomy and physiology. And you walked into this class and although it was an Eastern tradition, it referenced exactly as the body functions. And so it made complete sense. For me, it was a meeting of East and West in the body. So intellectually, it satisfied me, it ticked the boxes, but also physically, because although you get people who are very mind orientated, intellectual, maybe, or the dreamer side of the mind. For me, I'm an in the body person. I live in the body. And through all these years of yoga, I have got to the mind. But it was the initial connections and communications, and I can turn it this way and it does that, and I have to get this alignment here. I started to think of it in a way that made sense but felt great.
Got you. And then, so what would you say yoga gives to you? What is it that makes you continue to practice?
Well, I think it's just that journey, that exploration of body through the body to the mind with the breath is an endless pursuit. It makes me feel good. Occasionally, this will come in a later question, maybe not that easy to get to the mat for all sorts of reasons, but whenever you practice, whether it's a 5-minute practice, a class practice, hours of practice, the absorption, so absorption in the pursuit, in the activity, is just, it enthralls me actually. And of course, that enthusiasm doesn't come across quite so much because I've been doing it so long, but the love of the yoga, the love of the practice is so much deeper now, with that.
And I think as well, just as a new teacher starting off, it's quite difficult to communicate to a beginner the depth of the practice that's available should you want to, and it is a lifetime pursuit, but it's quite difficult to communicate that at the beginning when you're just doing basic standing poses and how to move and how to find the asana, how to find the pose. Now,
so I'll reach to the conveniently located yoga books behind me. And I think it's summed up so nicely in this book, where he talks about, so just doing these standing poses, the simple things, the seeds are planted. And for the tree of yoga, for your tree of yoga to grow, does take a lifetime. And you may never get to the fruits. You'll be lucky if you get the buds and leaves.
Okay.
So that's my sort of response to what you said.
Yeah.
I had no idea. For me, it was in the moment. And of course, it is meant to be in the moment, isn't it? At that moment, you're standing, adjusting your shoulder, letting the breath out, whatever. There's nothing else. It's in the moment.
Yeah, the absorption of it. And so have you got any favorite yoga poses?
Well, I knew this question was coming and I thought, this is not a good question. And I've just been listening to Desert Island Discs on the radio and thinking, we actually need a little bag to take away with us, if we're going to survive this journey. And so I have several. And if I empty my don't like, because there's nothing I don't like, and I don't think there's ever been anything that I don't like. In all honesty, I can say that. There's many poses I can't do, but I enjoy the working around them, towards them. So one of the first poses that I really loved was Anantasan or Adisyasan, so Lord Vishnu's couch. I fell in love with the name before we were even taught the pose. And I still just love the sublime balance of being on your side, where you can still fall over, lying on your side. I think that's very interesting. So it's so well named for what it is. And I am, I've naturally got quite open hips. So the fact I can lift my leg and extend it over feels nice. That's what people like. So Anantasan is up there. And one that I also say in class quite often, is one of my favorite poses, is Ardha Matsyendrasan. So the half Lord of the Fishes, seated twisting pose. And I like it for, well, the physical shaping of it, but actually to perform it well, you have to breathe well. And it really educates you in breathing, softening that diaphragm, allowing, so, and then the pose comes. So I like that engagement. So that's also up there. If we're going for egos, Natarajasan, because I think you've mentioned this in some of the interviews that we go to class with Ali from time to time online. You go all the time. And anyone who's not sure what pose that is, it's the trademark, I think. Yes, it's the trademark pose with Mr. Iyengar. And he's standing on one leg, catching his other foot behind him. So I'm now approaching that pose, and it's maybe too good for my ego that I'm able to approach it, but at least I'm not doing it like a donkey. So that's good. And
I know, and I appreciated Ali's teaching of it too, and actually how easy it is. The pose is so, the shape, and I think this is maybe comes down to Iyengar Yoga, to do that pose, to catch the foot and be leaning forward, and it's a totally different pose, but to actually have the spine upright and the back bend action to go, it's completely different. And you see now in this time of Instagram and Facebook, there's so many people doing that pose, leaning forward and being able to touch your foot, and it's so different. And it's quite, how do you find then, when you see, I don't know if you see it as much on social media, but that pose is so amazing, but so many people are not.
Well, to the Iyengar eye, it's poorly executed. In their world of maybe gymnastic type yoga, the fact they can get to this supposed end point of a photogenic pose, that's up to them. We follow a very disciplined school of yoga, and that, for me, is one of also the attractions about it. Looking after your body as part of your practice is very, non-violence begins with the practice, really. And so I think that's important. I'll just have one other pose in there to
Oh yes,
balance
the
things
favorite
out.
poses. Back to favorite poses. Yes, sorry.
Kurmasan, because as you can see, I am a fiery person, so quite a lot of Raja. And so people like me need a bit of quietening. They love all the zazz, but actually, so Kurmasan, where you retreat into your shell and learn to stay in a deep forward bend. So that is up there with the top poses. Probably quite good for a desert island, actually.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Very educational, and your descriptions of the poses and what they offer. I've learned a lot there. Thank you.
Welcome.
Now, and what about? I know you said there are no poses that you dislike, and I understand why you've said that. But are there any ones that you would describe as least favorite, or is that a non-question?
It really, you know, in all honesty, it's a non-question because if I attend class and they say, there's just nothing, I go, oh no, I can't stand that. I can't do that. I don't like that. I think, okay, that's what it is. And that's where we go. So I truly, honestly, and I can't recall really feeling like that about poses. There's ones that are hard, have been hard, and but the actual not liking of them, not wanting to do them, I can't recall.
Yeah. Okay. And then, have you got any tips for establishing a good home practice?
Well, that's also a good question, seeing as we have so many home practice sheets on our website. I think it starts, what I will say in class when I've got beginners classes, you know, because they start to feel they're put, here I am, I'm slouching in my chair. And so what happens is you're in the car, you're, you know, preparing the food for the home, and suddenly you start to stand up a bit more and you adjust your shoulders, and you use a moment while the kettle's boiling to stretch out in a Uttanasana. And that's what I say to people in class. It starts to become part of your life. You think, I need this stretch, this turn at this point in time. And so the practice in the first instance is quite informal. And I think if you find yourself doing that, that's great. And then there's this side where, because it is educational, that's why we have a yoga school, you know, in the Iyengar system. And then you start thinking, oh, maybe I should do it a bit more formally. So you get your mat out, and initially when you're quite new to it, you think, I don't know what to do. So you try just whatever comes to mind. And if that's all you do and the mat goes away, that's fine. But more often than not, that leads into, oh, I'll just try this. Oh, and I liked when we did that in class. And then it starts to build. And I think by the time I was doing teacher training, that's when I would definitely set aside time to, you know, for an hour or two a day. And I have to say, in all honesty, not 7 days a week. Even when you go to the Mother Institute in Pune, they don't encourage practice 7 days a week. Sunday is closed. You know, part of the practice is also rest and reflection. So, but really, the best practice, and this does happen, I'm sure you've had it yourself, where you start off, you know you've got a bit of time, but you don't have a time limit, and 2 or 3 hours just passes. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think I would be having that amount of time. I do find exactly that, though, that yes, the time when you go and you practice and you don't have a time limit and you're not being interrupted, the time does just pass. But it sounds such a luxury having all that time. I guess that's just me with my busy family life to have all that time. And that's why teacher training was so good, actually, that it gave you the time, it marked it out, and you had to get there, and you had to practice, and you had to prepare. And that, now being out of teacher training, I think I miss a little bit of that as well. I mean, it felt like a lot at the time, but it was so great as well to be in the.
Oh, you've reprioritized your time at this point.
Yeah.
Just don't worry, there's more exams, Joe.
Yeah, exactly. This is it. There's always the next.
But Mr. Iyengar, on that note of home practice, for the people listening to this, he used to say to his Indian students, there will be days you don't feel like practicing, but you go to your mat, your corner of the room, whatever it is you do, and you just sit down and think, right, this is where I would practice, this is what I should practice. I'm acknowledging the fact that I have yoga in my life, but today I'm not connecting with it. So that's it. The practice is over. You know, he's not saying you have to actually do 10 hours a day. He might have done that, but we don't have to do
that. The final question is, what do you enjoy about coming to class? So as a teacher, what do you get from coming to class? Or obviously you do a lot of preparation in the run up to the class, but the actual being together, and I guess this is quite pertinent now, is we're just on the cusp of coming out of Zoom and coming back to the studio.
Well, I think whether I'm the student in the class or the teacher, it's ultimately about connection. So I am really so excited that we're going to be, we've worked well with the Zoom. I've attended Zoom, people attend Zoom with me, and it's kept the yoga community alive, those who are prepared to work with that. But the actual real connection is with the people. So whether it's with the teacher, so that the way they react and respond, communicate with you will be very different when that energy of two human beings in the same space are there. Similarly, between my, so if I'm attending class, it's between the peers, isn't it? So there's an energy of sharing this practice. And sometimes you G people on and people are support. It's just a really important, and I would never have thought that was the most important thing, but the connection is important. You need to be with other human beings, like-minded to some extent. And if you think back to the history, of course, it was a very close connection between the teacher and the shashistra and the pupil, the sadhaka. So I think we've come back to appreciating that.
Yeah, definitely, isn't it? The things that we've all learned, maybe things we took for granted, and then lockdown has just stripped quite a lot back, and you see the things, what's really important,
and that connection, the outside connection with others, I think helps guide and steer us. So sometimes you're learning from the teacher, sometimes you're learning from your peers, and that is part of the internal process, because it is, of course, a mind game as well.
Yeah, great, Julie. Now that is through all our Yogi of the Month questions. So I'm just gonna is there anything else that you'd like to cover, or that you feel we've missed, or that sorry, I've not.
That's okay. I did write down the questions. Now the specs have to go on, not the clicky ones that everybody knows so well. You know, you could answer these questions in many different ways at different moments in time. And this is it. In this moment, these are the answers. I think the message is there. It's clear that we both have yoga in our lives, and we have many people that share that with us, you know, in our classes. So
yeah,
I hope this is what that comes through. We have a great system. We have superb teachers. I'm not talking about myself here. I mean, generally, collectively, the dedication that Mr. Iyengar and Gita in particular, and now Prashant as well, have put into taking this really classical art, science, philosophy, and making it accessible in the modern day. We are so lucky.
Yeah, very fortunate. And I do feel Iyengar Yoga as a global system, or a system that is available globally across the world of yoga, the lockdown and our big migration onto Zoom has just been amazing, and connected these teachers, these amazing teachers that you wouldn't have access to. You know, you would be lucky if they did a workshop once a year in your country. And now we can access, you know, it's been fantastic. The way that the menu of available workshops is just completely multiplied, and it's really amazing. And I've never been to Pune, but I've had access to all these amazing teachers because of lockdown. It's been one of the silver linings of it.
Absolutely. I think that's an important part of yoga too, is to think, well, so there many people say, oh, there's been this terrible lockdown, all the bad things about it. But actually, you know, open your minds to all the positive things that would not have happened. otherwise. So that's, in the yoga context, perfectly put.
Great. Right, Julie, thank you
Okay.
very much for your time. That's been wonderful. Our Yogi of the Month for May. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you very much, Jo. Thanks for doing it so well.